Okay, good morning everyone. So as Jo said, I'm David, this is Kathryn, and we've been working over the past year, I guess, with various things at the TEC, and a lot of things that we do are, yes, there's paperwork and it's trying to find money and all that sort of thing, but all those boring sounding things lead to real things that help your learners and real things that help your job in the classroom. And so that's the focus of what we're going to talk about today. The strategy and how they lead to real things that help you. And you've seen a few things that we have been rolled out over the symposium so far. So we're going to talk about that. And Kathryn's also going to start off with the strategic context with what the TEC is doing at the moment, something called the investment approach. And that's something you might have heard about. Essentially, it's about how the TEC actually makes investing in the outcomes actually a real thing and changing how we actually work. Because as you'll recall, people talk about outcomes a lot, but it's like, how do you actually make that real? How do you actually make a difference in that sense? Because we have a bit more time this morning, we might sort of pause for questions sort of throughout this session, because there is a lot of content that we have in there. And we're also going to take a bit of a team approach, so we won't just be me and Kathryn talking. Obviously Ben will chime in a bit about the assessment tool, and Denise from the Ministry of Education about their work at the end. So let's go start with the investment approach. Kathryn. Okay.
Well, David just explained it, really. So, who have you been part of the TEC sort of consultation on the investment approach? Yeah. So it's probably quite familiar to all of you. I think it's been, for me, it's been a really useful framework for the last year to have. And though it's not really that complicated, and I think it kind of feels quite logical, I think it's been really helpful for our work. I mean, the key thing is that it's all about the learner, which sounds really obvious, particularly to you guys, that it is all about the learner. But from a systems view, that's kind of the conversation that we're having across all of government, actually, MOE as well, and probably about time really. So all about the learner. Key thing for TEC, it's all about improving our system stewardship, which is essentially how we monitor and how we work with the system and work with providers. So there's a lot of work and a lot of thinking going on to how do we improve that space, and that's kind of what I want to talk about with you, about what this actually means for you and your work, and improving social and economic outcomes. So bringing it back to your work, we've been working really closely with investment teams. As you know, if you don't know, that the investment teams across TEC, they're currently, I guess, quite siloed. We've got the university, PTE, ITP, ITO. So the LNN team has been working more strategically across all of these investment teams and helping them, I guess, get into the LNN space, which is so familiar to you, but not necessarily familiar to the investment teams. So we've been building on these two practice tables. The one at the front, hopefully you're familiar with, this came from research that a lot of you were involved in, and it was around mapping out what embedding looks like. So that's a framework that we've put in the plan guidance, and we've also been, I guess, educating investment managers so they can have more useful conversations with TEOs. The other smaller diagram has come from the ITO sector, and we talked about this last year at the symposium. So we're working really closely with the ITO team to how do we embed this in their thinking and in their conversations. So hopefully you're going to be seeing, maybe not in this format, because we're looking at how do we simplify this for investment tools, but this is kind of the foundation. Any questions on that? And the other thing is that focus on the learner. So I guess what that means for LNN is that we are really pushing the assessment tool information, the potential of the assessment tool information, to move it from a compliance view to actually how we could use this information in investment decisions in the future. So what else do I want to say about that? So there's a lot of... Brendan Kelly was here yesterday, so he's the head of the information part of TEC, and they're developing a lot of investment products, which there's going to be a roadshow in the next couple of months, SDR roadshow, and you'll be getting more familiar with what the potential of this is. And this links to that learner view. So the data is now being presented not at a TEO view, but more a learner pathway. So it's linking in MOE's data and sort of showing, I guess, the journey of a learner. Now, currently, the assessment tool information is not part of that, and that's something over the next year we want to be working more so we can mash up, that's a technical information directorate term, mash up all the information we have around the learner with the assessment tool data. And that's going to paint such a rich picture. And, it's quite, I think if we manage to pull it off, I think it will definitely be world leading, because in a way it's like linking in the PAC data, which is all about those levels, with the STEP information. So that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on for the next year. Any questions about that? Oh, at the back.
My interest is in how could we take that data from the assessment tool on learners, or taurira, and the data we collect from MOE, and then develop some targeted pathways around literacy and numeracy development for those individuals from that data, or profiles of, at the moment it's sort of a bit stop-start. You get the LNet result, and then you've got to do a little bit of wriggling around, and then you've got to get them onto a pathway, whether that's with Pathways Awarua or your own teaching practice, or, do you know what I mean? But I think if we could actually connect all of those dots up using, the power of that data you're talking about, would be very powerful for us in the sector.
Yeah. So yes. Yeah, that is the work that's kind of...
It's like we've got the components,
but
we don't have it quite all connected in a smooth data flow. So there's a lot of stop-start as a practitioner, or as an organisation with a number of practitioners.
Yeah, so I guess TC's invested in a new product called Click, which is what's going to be roadshowed soon. So the potential of the future is that this is going to be accessible to the sector, and what you've described, wouldn't that be great if we can get to that stage where different providers you can log in and you can actually look at, use the data in a more sophisticated way. Yeah, both at an individual TEO level, but then also for us as an investor to look across. So, yeah.
Okay, good.
Connie? Yep, do you want my hand up, Connie?
Oh, kia ora korua. I'm just asking, you've said that we're going from compliance to investment decisions around the data. Can you tell us when the measurements for that will come out, please? That would be really amazing.
Yeah.
And how that's going to be determined, the benchmarks. Thank you.
I can't give a date for that. I think, we're at the early stages of investigating it. So, yeah.
Maybe, I think one of the things that, obviously, if you're at a provider, you're aware of, we released assessment tool usage data this year for the first time, and that's led to a lot of really good conversations with providers about where they could do better to have good practice with their learners, as well as meeting the funding conditions. With that, it's also led us at TC to think about, what are the right requirements and the right ways to ensure that the assessment tool is used properly. So it is about focusing on the learner, it's about encouraging good practice, but also looking over time about what are some other things we can do to have an investment approach rather than a purely compliance approach. So we're just starting that work now.
Mm. Oh.
Can you tell me, is there any tie with the investment approach to the contestable funding pilot for agriculture and horticulture that is occurring, we at Telford are deep in at the moment, in which we have to tender to teach and it's got all our stuff on Tenderloin. So is there a link with that?
We can't give an answer to you, unfortunately, on that. I think probably the best thing is to direct through Telford's investment manager at the TEC, those types of funding questions. Oh, yeah. So probably the best way we can't give an answer to that. We don't know the answer to that, so it's best to direct that query through the TEC's investment manager for Telford.
So I just wanted to outline the work that we've got underway around following on from the PIAC international survey that you heard about yesterday. So there are three things, and we've touched on them yesterday. One of them is, I'll start with the communications resource. This is what Diana was talking about yesterday, that we've funded that will be available very shortly, that you'll be able to access and hopefully use in your conversations, and it will be designed for you so you can take the key messages away. The other thing is an analysis program. This has been led by MOE and MB, the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment. And we've been part of that. And so they've already done 3 reports that are on the MOE website that you could have a look at. But the next one's off the block is a really detailed analysis of youth, one on Māori, Pacifica, though the sample size is smaller for Pacifica, and MB are doing one on the workforce, all the information that was collected around qualification and things like that. If you have any questions about that analysis program, I'm sure Paul, will be able to answer them. And the other thing that TEC is doing, we want to use the data in quite a practical way. We're planning to do a market segmentation or supply-demand kind of analysis. So we'll look at what it'll be high-level matching of what the PIAC data is saying, matched to what we've got with our learning progressions. And the intent of that is so we can better target or see where we can better target, particularly in the workforce. So that is underway now, and we're hoping to complete that in the next couple of months.
Okay, so any questions on any other questions about what we've talked about so far before I move on to how we're going with the strategy? Okay, so in the next few slides, hopefully you'll be familiar with what our literacy and numeracy strategy is. Essentially, we refreshed it last year and put it on our website in around October, November. And if you were at the symposium 2 years ago, you'll remember the Minister for Tertiary Education announcing that he's going to ask for a refresh of the strategy, which we didn't know until he actually said in his speech. But it's actually been a really good consultation and good piece of work for us, because it's led to us really being much clearer in what we want to do over the next 4 years with you and with providers on how to lift skills. And the PIAC results give us further impetus about some of the things that we are going to do. So the next few slides are going to highlight some of the progress in here, and I think we'll pause for questions at the end of each kind of section as well. So the first one there, we're going to talk about how do we reach more people to help them succeed. So on an ongoing basis, TC does invest over $300 million in literacy and numeracy funding every year. About $250 million of that are in the big general teaching funds of Student Achievement Component, of Youth Guarantee, and the Industry Training Fund. But about $50 million is in the specific funds, which some of you might be involved with, the Workplace Literacy and Numeracy Intensive ESOL, Refugee English, and also the Adult Literacy Educator Grants are included in that. There is particular growth in the Workplace Literacy and Numeracy Employer-Led Fund. Obviously, those changes that have made it easier to access the funds, to work with employees there, and that's because the workplace is a priority for the government and for us in reaching more people to improve their skills. The Skills Highway program, obviously they sponsored the networking event, and also they're working a lot with employers to help employers confirm the issues that are in their workplace and the help that they can get to make things better. The number there of 45 active programs, so that's quite huge growth for us over the past 1 or 2 years. So the number of places in employer-led, that's grown from about 1,100 last year, 2015, to we expect almost 2,100 this year. So that's huge growth in a short period of time. It suggests that there is quite an opportunity there, and that's why the government's budget added some more funding to employer-led, about an extra $2 million. The last bullet point there, so things that will be coming soon for you to working with the Industry Training Federation to create more workplace-friendly versions of our existing resources, particularly the learning progressions. And the point of these resources is to make it easier for employers and employees to understand and apply literacy and numeracy skills to their work. A little bit like, I guess, the leaflet that Gary Sharp made about translating the progressions into actual things one can and cannot do.
Can I just ask Gary to put his hand up again? Oh, thank you. I didn't know who you were. We've been using your resource, so it's good to put a face to it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So any questions on this sort of workplace, on this funding sort of section? Okay. Next thing we'll talk about is how we've been trying to target support better to individual learners. So I want to focus more on the resources that we currently use and love, such as the assessment tool and Pathways Aurora. So firstly with the assessment tool, so there have been a number of enhancements that we have been rolling out for this year. One of the big ones, of course, has been the starting points listening and listening and reading options, and that's been really exciting to have that out there, and really, hopefully you've been finding it good to use with your learners. And that joins the suite of options, or I guess you could call flavours, that are in the assessment tool now: the adult option, also the youth option, and Te Ata Hapara, the reading option for Māori learners. Just curious, just a show of hands, who's used the starting points options in the past 1 or 2 months? Who's used starting points recently? Oh yeah, that's pretty good. And who's used the youth option recently of the past 1 or 2 months? Again, a good share of hands. That's good to see. Anyone with Te Ata Hapara, anyone used that recently as well? Cool. And so the reason these options are now in place is partly because of feedback from you as the educator, from providers. And so what we try and do at TC, wherever possible, is see, what can we do to improve the resources to ensure they are relevant for the learners that you work with. And so now, Ben is going to talk briefly about some of the enhancements to the assessment tool that they're rolling out now and very soon. Yep.
Thanks, David. Kia ora whānau. For those of you that were preparing for the symposium, might have been tooting around on the assessment tool over the weekend, we had a little bit of an outage, and we're pleased to present 2 new homepages, and this is just part of the evolution of the assessment tool. As David mentioned, as we've had successive funding coming in through in response to the feedback from your good selves about the gaps in the suites of assessments that are available, etc., TSC has responded, and we've been able to work with them to create those new options. Starting points, we're really excited with how that's going, so we'll put a bit of a plug. We've got the after lunch session, but do come and fall asleep at our tables rather than someone else's. So we're really excited to talk to people about that. But I guess the final piece that we just rolled out over the weekend, 2 new dedicated pages. So the one we've got here is the one that now separates out access for educators and organisation administrators. We realised that we had all these home pages for our learners, but if we kept on sending them through this hybrid page where you've got your admin and your educator and then your learner, it kind of weakens that effect. And in terms of the suite of what we've got kind of at your fingertips now, so it was fantastic to see Nikki talking about the National Centre site, and really we see the National Centre site, Pathways Aurora, the assessment tool, and then also the TSC suite of pages, so the Guidelines and Skills Highway. We really wanted to make sure we had those at your fingertips, so now when you go to log in, this is the page that you'll see, all of the same links to log in, to get into the assessment tool, but much more at your fingertips about the sort of day-to-day information that we'd hope that you guys are checking out. And a little ability also on the bottom left-hand side to be able to email us. Also too, we're really pleased that we've actually got our message board on the homepage now, because before, if you had an outage, you had to log into the tool, which you couldn't, to hear that there was an outage. So I don't know, yeah, that's what happens when you leave it to the techie guys. And then this is the learner focus page. So again, just trying to make it nice and clean, and what you can see there too is all the sort of work just to really show that all of these assessment options sit within a suite or a family. They're related, so hopefully they're trying to soften. It doesn't really matter which one you're using, you know, whichever one is appropriate for you, but you might then engage with the different versions there. And both pages have got links to each other, so you're never going to get lost, so to speak. And beyond that, we'd just like to put in a plug for the work that's been going on behind the scenes by the TEC and the data team. Earlier on this year, we had a real spike in activity on the help desk when providers were getting their reports from TEC, and then we're looking at their in-house data and sort of trying to figure out how this matched up, where there were gaps, etc. And from a support perspective, it's been really pleasing for us to be able to say, hey, look, this is a conversation we can take back to TEC. Often it's involved the investment managers, so there's been learning that has been taking on, or learning that's been taking place for all parties, and I think in most instances we're seeing organisations going away with a better understanding of what they're doing, TEC are getting a better appreciation for what you guys have to do to deal with the data. So yeah, really glad just to see that's moving positively. And the final plug from us is, if you've got any questions at all, please just don't sit there and get frustrated or fume or curse or wave your hand at the computer or what have you. Do give us a call. That's Tanya, Alice and myself on the help desk. All the contact details are in the PowerPoint or on the National Centre website under contact details. So yeah, do get in contact. That's what we're here for, to help you guys out. Cool, thanks.
Well, thanks, Ben. So just a little bit more about data. So Kathryn's going to talk more about the assessment tool. Oh,
Can you just wait a minute?
Ben?
Good morning. On? Okay. I come from an area where a lot of our students actually struggle. Pardon? Okay. So I come from Gisborne area, and we're finding the content of a lot of the questions aren't really relevant to our students, so they get put off even before they start. For instance, some of them have never watched a cricket game, so they don't even go on and read, even though the clue's sitting there about overs and that kind of thing. So I was just wondering if there was any chance of sort of more questions that would meet the needs of students like we would work with in Gisborne and maybe other areas in the country. Okay. And the second thing is, if we could have the youth one printable, because what's happening with my students, you know how you sometimes have a piece of reading and then 3 questions. So your first one, and then you click submit, and then they'll go on a bit, and then they think, oh, damn, I've done the wrong answer, and they can't go back and change it.
Yeah.
So they get quite frustrated, so they tend to prefer a printed one. So for those students that are actually struggling, I'm having to give the adult printed one rather than them working with the youth one.
Okay, cool. Okay, so 2 questions there. The first one around content. Content is really challenging. When the assessment tool first came out, the item content was in broad strokes, so with a bit more of a workplace flavour, which we've since seen change with youth, which is a bit more everyday literacy and numeracy, and then with the change of starting points and the other content. The biggest challenge around having more content that is aligned up with the particular vocation or a particular area, there's kind of 2 things going on there. One is that if you're giving people literacy and numeracy content in the context in which they're studying, potentially where they've got a passion or an interest, there is the chance from an assessment perspective that people might punch above their weight there, but then they might not do so well in the broader literacies and numeracies, which again is part of the kind of broader work. The other challenge too is that if we were to go down the path of having item banks big enough to service, boat building, and I know I'm just picking numbers out or names out of the air here, boat building or apprenticeships in terms of, carpentry or those sorts of things, we'd need probably quite a lot more money from these guys. So which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, but there's sort of decisions, there's limited resources, so that's why we've gone for literacy and numeracy more broadly, but then looked to focus on particular audiences and how we do our best to engage those folks. Youth at the moment, TEC has invested another couple of years worth of funding, so we are actively writing new youth items at the moment, and there's work going on with the sector there to get in touch to trial content. As we know, youth also has that strong focus on Māori and Pacifica within that youth subset, so there's work going on with providers there. So if you are interested in seeing the flavour of the new content or feeding directly into that, do get in touch. I'll grab your contact details afterwards so we can respond to that. In terms of youth being online, when youth was funded by TEC, there was a purposeful decision to make that online only, and that was informed by the fact that TEC, through the data that they've got along with MOE, can see where the vast majority of those learners are situated, and in the main they were situated with providers that would have the ICT resources to, computer suites, etc. So that meant that we were looking online in the first instance there. As far as I know, there aren't any plans to look to transition the youth option to paper. I think as we look further ahead, we're looking more and more increasingly at ICT solutions. So I think if anything overall were to be the trend, we might be heading more toward online than paper, but don't take that as a big policy decision or anything like that. But I think, we're looking at phones and things, other ways that people are engaging with content. So, yeah, and I guess what sits under that is while we've got all of these new options and we're always looking for new innovations about how to support the work that you do, from time to time there will be pockets of people that we're just not able to serve quite as well as others. But again, do keep in contact around that. If that's the case for you, do get in touch. If we don't get that on TC's radar, we can at least have a conversation around that. So, yeah, again, I'll just encourage you to get in contact about that. Cool, and I'll absolutely grab your details afterwards.
Ben, just one question. Can we have a single sign-on? Oh, you're Mr. D here.
Mr. D.
My 5th year here, actually. I've seen this tool, from the early days, looking really beautiful. Well done, mate. And look, I was thinking, is there a possibility that we could have a single sign-on, so the user, the learner, does the reading, numeracy, and then also pathways, and then also the reassessment? Yeah. Please. Pretty please.
Okay, so single sign-on. Basically, if you've got what would be a good example of that? Say you went to the National Centre website and you had single sign-on for the entire suite of assessment tool Pathways Awaroa. So what that would mean is you'd have one registration, you log into the National Centre, from there you've got a profile automatically into the assessment tool, into Pathways Awaroa, or anything else that's going on. There is work going on at the moment to look at some of the systems that sit behind the assessment tool, but that's coming at the moment more from a data perspective, because we do see providers are increasingly wanting to be able to align the data coming out of the assessment tool with what you hold in your student management systems or your databases. That's actually part of creating a data set, which is much more similar to what TEC analyse, with the WE funding and what have you. At the moment, Dee, we're probably a little bit far away from that. I think the focus at the moment with TEC has been on fit-for-use tools, and now we're starting, I think, with the home pages, etc., now we're starting to get more into the interface. But we do appreciate that, a lot of times asking that learner to do that extra click, that extra link, that just adds an extra step, and then sometimes you do miss people and that requires follow-up, etc. But certainly, I think as time goes on, we will see more work coming to tie those systems together. Maybe not by this Christmas, though. Yeah, cool. Okay, maybe one more? I don't want to hold the time. Yeah.
I'm Sarah Searle. I've come from primary ITO and now I work for Cornerstone. In both of those situations, we've had a problem with historical data. In primary ITO, when we merge with the NZ ITO, we can't show the gain from the previous database to the one that we have now. And also, I've found the same issue now with Cornerstone from the Saddlers database. We can't show the gain from those historical people. So is there anything being done in that regard? Yeah, there is. What's happening there is that we've had a lot of mergers, particularly with ITOs, but also we're seeing with PTEs. So what will happen is you'll have two organisations that have either merged, subsumed, or one has purchased the other. And what the process has been is that we haven't sort of, to use that term, mashed up or smushed. We use a different term for putting data together. Very technical. So what because what would happen is if you put all that together, then you start to lose that legacy or history that organisation existed at that point in time, etc. So we've got ways that we support organisations, if that is something you're dealing with, to make sure that you've got people who retain a user role to be able to jump into the historic organisation, get data, but also you're working under your new one. No, that's in terms of logins and stuff like that. So you do have that under your ESA system. You do have that. You just need to get in contact with the ministry to be able to... Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, I agree to disagree. But anywho, moving on. The thing with data, in terms of the gain reports, that is something that we're having a look at. That is the intention that if you do generate a gain report and it includes data from another organisation and the date range is accurate, or the date range is relevant to when they set that information or those assessments at previous organisations, then that should be worked. So we're just double checking on that. Yeah, cool. No worries. 2 rounds of applause.
So we've talked about this, about where we're going with the data, but one thing I thought I'd share with you is that part of continuing improving our resources is we have been working closely with investment teams, and we've been putting them all through the assessment tool. So they have been coming to an hour session where they have to come in as a student, and we're the tutors, and we've done our best to represent how you would be about welcoming a student and making them feel comfortable. Then they do the assessment, and then halfway through the session we change it up and we go, come on, time to go, we've got to get to, this is just for TEC, just move it along. Some of these investment people have been around for a long time, and the comments we've got back have been great, because it's starting to click about what the assessment tool is, when we talk about embedding, the learning progressions. So I think it's been a really valuable exercise, and it's something that I think we're going to continue to do at TEC, so to build the capability, internal capability. But yes, I don't really have anything more to say about the data. I think we've kind of really signalled where we want to head with this.
Cool, okay, Pathways Aotearoa. So hands up, who's used Pathways Aotearoa with their students over the past 2 months? A lot of hands, that's really, really good to see. And so with Pathways Aotearoa, one of our big focuses has been to get more people using the tool, because the research shows, as you've found, that educators and learners enjoy using the tool to supplement the classroom teaching, to reinforce it, even as a homework activity, or even many other different users, as a few people offered at the demo workshop with Pathways Aotearoa yesterday. So for us, where we've been able to find funding, we've put it towards creating more modules and more opportunities to learn in particular contexts, such as the road code and such as health and safety, as the Minister launched last year. So essentially now there are over 400 modules inside Pathways Aotearoa that help learners improve their literacy and numeracy skills. Obviously those first 10 health and safety modules are now live on Pathways Aotearoa, and this, if you weren't here yesterday for the launch, the modules that were developed with the Industry Training Federation, their purpose is to help learners understand health and safety in the workplace while improving their literacy and numeracy competencies. And we know that this is obviously a very relevant, very current issue, a hook for learners, just as the road code and getting a driver's license is a hook as well. On the right-hand side of the heavy vehicle pathway, so that's a further development on the road code pathway, so again collaborating with the Transport Agency and to help learners try and get a full heavy vehicle license in the future. And by the end of this year, there will be modules with regards to starting points, and also step 4 reading, and also 2 new word fit lists about vocabulary. Also, some particularly big enhancements we're launching at this symposium. One is that your learners will soon be able to use Pathways on their smartphone, and it'll sort of work and view really well on their smartphone. And so it's been optimised so it shows it in a portrait view rather than a landscape view, which you see on the desktop computer. The second big enhancement with regards to tablets on the left-hand side is a series of apps so that a learner can use Pathways offline if they have a tablet or an iPad or an equivalent device. And so there was a really good demo of this yesterday. Essentially, once these apps are on their apps are on the sort of app stores that learners can access, and so a learner essentially downloads them off the store, they log in, and then they can go offline and then use Pathways as normal, and then the next time they are near internet access, they can go online again, and then sort of the results will be uploaded to the central system. So the reason we've got these enhancements here is to make it easier to use this wherever the learner is, and this will help address at least some of the barriers for those who perhaps don't have regular internet access there. So before we go to, I guess, our sort of second to last and last sections, any questions on anything else we've talked about so far, about the resources, about assessment tool, pathways. Yep, at the back there, Nikki.
Hi, thanks for that. Just like to judge the interest in perhaps having some financial literacy modules on Pathways Aurora.
Yeah, we're very open to
Please put your hand
feedback
up
on that.
if you
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely very. Oh, yep. So we're always looking for suggestions on how to keep ensuring these resources are relevant to help you and your learners. So financial literacy is certainly very open to that. Question in the middle.
Can you wait for the microphone, please? Not so much a question, but a comment. I know that Jill did mention last year's symposium that she's developing that.
Yeah, so it's kind of in the works, but very aware that financial
With
literacy
funding.
Sorry, what?
Funding from TEC, she was just waiting for more. Kapai.
Well, what we're trying to do is partner as well with other organisations, so like New Zealand Transport, they part-funded. We've got WorkSafe endorsing the health and safety. So with financial literacy, you know, it's definitely the next one off the rank. Yeah. And we're really hoping to get quite a significant partner in that. Yeah. So.
And one more question from Nicola.
Thank you. I just wanted to, Nikki asked who was interested in financial literacy, and I'm just wondering if there's a possibility for some ESOL stuff on Pathways and whether there'd be interest in that.
Sure,
No
very,
interest?
very open to suggestions on that, so feel free to email us any further details
Yeah,
on
okay.
that
So
suggestion.
some ESOL Pathways would be
Okay.
fantastic.
All right. Cool. All right. Thanks for that. So now we're talking to the bottom right section of our strategy about how to ensure tutors and trainers are well equipped and some of the things we're trying to do there. So the first thing I want to touch on is the appropriate qualification requirements. So that, as you'll be aware, that applies to if your class is funded by a student achievement component, by intensive literacy and numeracy, by the workplace literacy and numeracy funds. And so the evidence that we've had, I guess, feedback from providers is that, you know, people are getting on with it, and that certainly people who've gone through the qualification, some have found it, yes, it's a bit challenging as learning can be, but they've found it's really been worth it in the end. The evidence from the competitive student achievement component 1 and 2 competitive process in terms of all the applications for that also suggests that TEOs are increasingly, you know, meeting these requirements, and we're certainly very appreciative of the time and the effort and the cost that is involved with this requirement. But the goal, as we know, is to try to ensure that we can use the resources that are available and embed literacy and numeracy well, so that learners can hopefully, you know, get better skills. So that's really is the reason for that requirement. I guess the other thing that we'll also have a plug for is that there are, you know, more ways to help demonstrate their requirements. So, for example, Graham Smith, ALAC, with the TESOL kind of option, that's something that we've welcomed as a way to ensure ESOL educators, you know, using their experiences, can show they meet the requirement, and that's been going, from what I understand, you know, really well. But yeah, that's kind of where we're going. That requirement is here to stay.
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly mention a review that is going to be underway probably in about a month. This is the review we're looking at our investment in professional development, and it's really just to take stock and look at where we want to go and what's the best way of getting there. So it's looking at different models, it's looking at what the current model is, it's understanding what works for you guys, and yeah, we just want to pull it all together and early next year inform our future sort of funding in this space. So we're just scoping it up, and we definitely want to be involving providers and tutors, and you know, I know there's a lot of different practices out there, and how you work with the National Centre and how you work with ARCO, and so that's kind of what the review will be sort of looking at.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason why we thought it was timing to do such a review is that, you know, things are a lot different from when we first, you know, when this whole work program was started, you know, 5, 6, or even more than that. And given the investment approach that we outlined at the start, And given the focus on using data more, and also given that the capability in the sector is much greater and better than it was, it's time to find out what actually works best for you and your colleagues in terms of ensuring there is the right capability to work well with learners to embed literacy and numeracy in the future. Last few slides before we go to the very last section. So also new online resources. So really useful, really good to have Nikki outline the wealth of knowledge that is on the Literacy and Numeracy for Adults website and the embedded approaches resources that are on there. Also Hitanga Waka, who we'll recall from yesterday, launching a digital flipbook. And so this is again, it's one of our first signals of where we want to go about, we recognise that sometimes it's hard for tutors to go to, say, a full day workshop in another town. And so what are some ways to develop refreshers or ways to supplement that type of training? So these new online interactive resources, they're designed to help anyone who's new to the sector or who's been in the sector for a while to know how to embed literacy and numeracy properly without necessarily having to pay a lot of money. And again, also new resources about the workplace coming soon. So again, this sort of repeats what Nikki sort of talked about. The website, we really emphasised the website is such a valuable place, but there is more we could do to ensure more of the content is brought out. And those teaching and learning sequences, the resources by subject are there. And we sort of, National Centre suggested, what subject areas the resources should be in. And so the new suite released recently include how to use the learning progressions effectively with learners, resources related to the NCEA Level 1 Literacy and Numeracy Unit Standards, and also a set of resources about dyslexia. So I encourage you to go on their website, under that section there, Embedded Literacy and Numeracy, and have a look around. The other resources that we're quite excited about that are there for, I guess, trialling and perfecting are the digital flipbooks by Hitanga Waka. And again, interactive, a new way to bring out the content that is there and also building on what we already have. So definitely encourage you, if you haven't already, to stop by their stall, the Ako Aotearoa stall, and give some feedback on the prototypes of the flipbooks there. So we're coming up to the very last section, which is about how we work with other government agencies. So I guess just recapping some of the things we've talked about so far, about real, we've talked about, it's about real things that help you in your job and things that work well with your learners. So we've had, the resources from Hitanga Waka, the wealth of knowledge from the National Centre, the growth in the Workplace Literacy and Numeracy Fund, the new options in the assessment tool, new developments in Pathways Awarua. So these are real things. But with that, there's a lot of work that we do across government as well to try and reach more adults too. So we'll just pause for any last questions there before we go to the very last section with Denise. So any questions there? So we've got 3 questions. So, 4, yep.
Thank you. I'm from Southland. I would just like to suggest that when you talk about investment and capability in PD, that there are many groups of people who live outside of Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch who also would appreciate access to reasonably priced and available PD. Not all people are able to travel to the main centres. Thank you. And also, I realise the value and access of resources online, but they don't actually work for everybody. And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Thank you. There's still a place in this world for hard copy of some resources. Thank you.
Hi David, Graham here. Just on the online resources side of things, now in a request from my side, the learning progressions the TEC are not printing any more of, which I'm fine with that, so they're online. Just wondering, with the learning progressions and other online resources moving forward, it would make sense from my side if these were then on their own websites. Like, I really appreciate the fact that the program for this symposium has its own website. It makes it really easy to find, it's easy to navigate, there's just one click and I'm there. So moving forward, new resources, I mean, it's kind of cheap, much cheaper now to have a separate website for its own thing rather than making things bigger and bigger and bigger. So just an idea for you, new resources, could they have their own site? I don't think it adds to complexity, I think it lends itself more to ease of navigation.
Okay, thanks for that feedback. There was two more.
I just want to return to the financial literacy question. You mentioned looking for partnerships that could finance this. I can just see right away that banks would be interested, but banks are also self-interested and may not know very much about the kinds of people that populate our adult literacy and numeracy classes. So how are you going to bring in people who really have had a lot of experience working with them, such as people helping with budgeting and community people, if your partnerships are dollars?
Yeah, okay. So I'll just, in terms of that question, that's very useful feedback. So I think we'll be quite mindful of that when we go ahead with, I guess, developing whatever new enhancements there might be to the resources. When we've sought partners, for example, we've tried to keep that in mind. So the Industry Training Federation is an appropriate partner with, health and safety modules because they have that reach into the workplace. WorkSafe because of the health and safety. Banks, yes, that could be one partner, but there could be other partners. So again, thanks for that feedback.
You seem to talk just about money.
Well, I guess it's about skills for life. I mean, people have talked about, what skills do people need in daily life, and there was quite a strong endorsement, I guess, of financial literacy as a way to learn that. But also we have to be mindful for us as a public servants that we also work in a constrained fiscal environment as well. But we are mindful of what are appropriate partners, and we put protections with regards to self-interest and that sort of thing in our contracts. So it's about really what TEC is trying to seek, not about what a bank wants to seek necessarily. That's usually what we try and do with these types of arrangements.
Thank you.
I'll just give a little bit of response to. Yep. I'll give a bit of a response just to the first two questions in terms of Nellie from Southland. So definitely recognise the importance of trying to have professional development that's accessible to people who can't travel easily to other centres. That's partly why we've got these online resources so that you can do it at home, you can do it where you are. So that's part of the intent there. And in terms of Graham's question about separate websites, I think our intent at the moment is to ensure that the Literacy and Numeracy for Adults website, that is the main portal for where you need to go about literacy and numeracy. That is still our intent. So we think creating separate websites is probably unnecessary fragmentation of that. But that's our intent at the moment, to ensure if you want to know about literacy and numeracy, how to teach it well, go to the Literacy and Numeracy for Adults website. Another question. Yep.
Hi, I just want to share a concern with TEC that I've observed. Those of us who do industry-based training, a lot of your new tutors are industry experts who haven't tutored before. And in the past, the first thing you would enrol them in would be the adult education trainer type qualification. And that would give them the good foundation on how to be a tutor. Now that we have to enrol them in county first, they're playing on with this. You can't enrol them in the other at the same time, of course. And so for the first year, 18 months of being brand new tutors, they're not getting that foundation of how to be a tutor, formal training, apart from the sorts of input that we give them, buddies and workshop sessions with ourselves. I've got an underlying concern that that's round the wrong way. But we have no choice because we have to enrol them in our county first. And I'm concerned that you come across people who don't really understand assessment and how to do things properly, or they don't really understand unit standards properly. And you can run little workshops internally till you blue in the face and you've still got gaps because you've got limited ability. So I just want to raise that with TEC, that by pushing in county, we are being forced to lay aside the how to be a tutor qualification.
All right, just thank you for your feedback on that. Were there any other questions or feedback? Was there one more? Oh, sorry, you're starting it. Yeah.
Hello.
Sure. Okay.
Then we'll go straight to Emma.
We'll get Diana first, and then we'll go.
Yeah, it's just a follow-up to the points about financial literacy. Colleagues may like to know that there's a part of He Kaikaikaringa, which is the Māori Economic Development Strategy that people will be familiar with, There's a working party on Māori savings and financial literacy, which I'm honoured to be a member of, invited member of, and that brings together representatives of the Commission for Financial Capability, Māori organisations, other organisations with an interest in financial capability. I don't know if Pushpa is here, but if she were, would be jumping up and down. So it's a grouping within which financial capability is very much, within For Māori, is very much on the agenda and has the ear of government. So certainly that should be part of the TEC's sort of discussions there.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Okay, so the very last section is about working with other agencies. So we've outlined quite a few of them so far. Before I hand over to Denise of the Ministry of Education, in terms of the New Zealand qualifications program that we work with, so Amy Buckland at the back, do you want to stand up? Yep. So Amy, I understand, presented yesterday about the adult literacy and numeracy and the qualifications, and I understand there was some discussion there. So one of the things that ECQA is working on with NZCR is developing or trialling an online assessment with regards to the literacy and numeracy unit standards at level 1 of NCEA. And so NZQA will be trialling and piloting this type of assessment, and they'll be seeking some participants over October and November. The reason NZQA wants to develop such an assessment is to see if this, how this standard, the literacy and numeracy unit standards at level 1, could be awarded by completing a specific assessment. So that's some work NZQA has underway. And with that, I'll hand over back to Denise about the Ministry. Yep.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. So, you need the mic?
Good.
Right.
A good 10 minutes.
I'll stay here. And I've been given 10 minutes. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. David and Kathryn, thanks for the opportunity to demonstrate to you here today that actually we have to work cross-agency if we're thinking about learners in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And the topic that I want to talk to you about today, just keep doing that, that's really helpful. Denise, get back to the microphone because I'll always wander. The reason that we're talking to you about this piece of work today is because it is going to have a direct effect on your work. So I'm going to talk to you about what does sufficient literacy and numeracy look like for learners in life. So when our young people leave the education system, we want them all to have that sufficient level of literacy and numeracy. And actually, we've been struggling to work out what that thing was and get an agreement about what that level is. And a significant piece of cross-agency work now around how to think forward, plan forward, and make sure that we secure this level of competency in our education system and in society. We can't do this work without taking an investment approach like TEC is. So the notion that we are investing so that we can get the money to where it is most needed, so that every learner leaves our system with literacy and numeracy competency, that's the investment approach we're taking, and it marries very well with the TECs. So in schooling in New Zealand, we set our expectations for learning through our curriculum and through the standards that we set in the system. You will know probably in the last 5 years we set national standards in years 1 to 8 in reading, writing and mathematics, and that was so that we could secure that level of foundation knowledge so that our young people could meet the demands of their curriculum. You will hear the language that I'm using will resonate with the language that you use in your workplace because we have been designing coherently over the last 10 years. Our designers, so you know the work that Jill and Sue have done to develop the adult learning progressions. I'm going to talk shortly about the new learning progression framework that will be launched by the Minister next week. And these frameworks speak to each other. They've been designed to speak to each other so that we can get that coherent understanding about what literacy and numeracy should look like over time. So the significance of literacy and numeracy has been secured. It's embedded in our curriculum, and if you know the New Zealand curriculum in particular, literacy was embedded in particular, and with that embedding, it is very fragile. It is very easy to lose sight of what that competency or capability needs to look like. So I want to talk a little bit about how we have to keep a really explicit eye on what we mean by that competency. So we've secured the importance of reading, writing and mathematics in our curriculum through our standards. Teachers are required to report to the learners, the parents and to the Ministry of Education about how learners are progressing through the system, and the Ministry is learning to use robust information to make sure that we get support to the right places. Who's progressing in the way that we expect, who's not, how do we free up our resource to get to those learners? Very much like Kathryn and David described in using that same investment strategy in TEC. So monitoring is key in the work that we do. When we look at the information that's provided to us, and I've just pulled a couple of snapshots down here. The top slide is our National Standards data. What it's showing, because I know the print's a little small, but essentially what it's showing is over years 1 to 8, so that's our 5 to our 10, 11, 12-year-olds, that overall you're seeing a slight decline in progress and achievement. Okay. Now, we know that that pattern has been alive and well in the education system for some time. Our national monitoring study also tells us that there's a dip between years 4 and 8. And we're trying to figure out how to address that, how to reverse that dip, and that is through helping teachers to be really clear about supporting literacy. What does the teaching and learning need to look like? And our learning progression framework, just like your adult progressions, is one of our key tools in helping teachers to be clear about the demand and make sure that our learners can read, write and maths across the curriculum, not just in the English learning area. So we've had this persistent pattern in our system for some time, and it's very hard, it's very resistant to change, but we're determined to reverse that pattern. Our year 9 and 10 in our education system don't have a set of markers or signposts that sit alongside them. Now we're doing some work around that, not because we need more standards, but because we've got to keep our eye on our learners. Now, what we know from the practice evidence is that teachers are minimising the literacy demands in the classroom. We can tell that by sending our key researchers into the classrooms and looking at the practice. Now, teachers are doing it in the best interests of the learners. Our researchers could see that really clearly because they were trying to support the learners to succeed. But what was happening was there was a dumbing down and simplifying of tasks. Now, our job is to make sure that our teachers know how to scaffold learners to meet the demand. So there's stretch in there. And we can tell that that practice is a little kind of wobbly. In NCEA, that's the second image that you can see, overall, so this is aggregate data, overall we can tell that there's a good story about the students, or 18-year-olds, achieving NCEA level 2. But we are very aware from other data sources that actually if you go down inside the literacy and numeracy demands, that actually that story isn't secure and it doesn't look quite like that. And we've been trying to recognise and respond to an issue that many of you will know and understand through the work that you do. Now, this piece of research was commissioned by TEC. Most of you will have some idea about it because it was launched late last year. Thank you. Just a wee bit of time there so I can slow down a little bit. So you just give me a wave if you know about this research that was published by TEC. Okay, now there are some caveats that sit around this piece of research, but actually it was very timely for the Ministry of Education, because what it did was it supported all of the anecdotal information that we had from people working in tertiary settings, employers, and actually when we went out and started to speak to secondary principals and those in schooling, they all told us that they recognised that this really was a problem, and that is that NCEA was not a strong indicator or a reliable indicator for literacy and numeracy capability. Okay, now most of our learners take an achievement standards pathway, and in that achievement standards pathway, literacy and numeracy are embedded in the tasks. So we have made the assumption that with NCEA comes a strong literacy and numeracy capability. And when this report was shared with us about a year ago, and we worked with TEC to get it released, for us, again, it supported the voices that were telling us that this really was a problem. So we know we can't use NCEA as a reliable indicator for lit num. The other thing it told us was, because it looked at our Year 8 students, so those were leaving intermediate or full primary schools, and those students who were meeting the national standard or who were above the national standard, there was a pretty high likelihood that those students would actually be able to meet a benchmark that was set somewhere around all level 3. And if we think that's roughly what a good benchmark should look like, actually a lot of our Year 8, Year 9 students were already there. So the second key piece of information that was really important to us was that it's unlikely that growth is occurring over time through our schooling system in literacy and numeracy. Now, it's that kind of information that really helps us springboard into good policy change. And that's what we're doing right now with TEC and with NZQA. Now, we can't do this work without lining up all of our agency partners. So you'll have seen versions of diagrams like this over time. There's still one sitting on the TEC website right now. But the big problem that we're trying to solve is, how do we get a shared understanding across the education system about what is a level of sufficiency? Some people say foundation, some people say minimum requirement or minimum standard. But what is the level of literacy and numeracy that we agree across our education system that all of our learners should be leaving school with and going out into work and life? And of course, that never stops, because with rich tasks and rich opportunities, we continue to build that over time. But what does that look like? We're using the term sufficiency at the moment because we just don't want to get caught up in the language for now, but you get my meaning. It's enough to be able to engage with meaningful tasks wherever you are in school, work or life, and to continue to grow over time. So this is the problem we're trying to solve. The diagrams that you have seen previously have sometimes they map things like, we start off from either a PAC or an all benchmark. Now, this has been updated to map the levels of PAC, and I'm not going to go into PAC today because I know you've had a session, but we're assuming that those markers can help us get a kind of a robust benchmark. So we've mapped PAC, we've mapped the adult literacy and numeracy progressions, we've mapped the unit standard, and we've mapped the curriculum. And that's the key piece that we've not achieved before when we're trying to secure a shared understanding of this benchmark. So this is us trying to work out, well, can we peg this so that it's consistent across the system? Now, we're playing with this idea at the moment, and we've got a survey out there right now, which I'm going to give you a link to, which is us checking with people to say, would this benchmark work? So we've got to agree a benchmark. We've got to set the benchmark consistently across our system with all of our partners. In the education system, we have got to realise that our students can get there. So that means we've got to build capability. And that's where our learning progression framework comes in. You cannot implement a benchmark and then not help the people in the system step up and achieve that. So we've got a big piece of joint work to do around how do we support the sector to do so. We've got to put the benchmark on our progressions, just like the adult tool did with the adult progressions. We've got to locate that, and then we've got to be able to check. So all the time we've got to be able to check, are our learners getting there? If they're not getting there, what do we have to do in the system to be able to provide that step up? So we've had a go at drafting this benchmark, okay? We've tested it out. We've worked with Paul and David in our OECD indicators department to make sure that it's secure so that it speaks to PIAC, and we've made sure that it speaks to the adult learning progressions. So it looks a little bit like this. I'm going to give you the link to the website if you want to go in and have a look, and more importantly, if you want to feed back to us, because the survey is live right now. If you go into the website, you can see that each of reading, writing and mathematics has a clear descriptor. This is what we think a benchmark should look like. Do you agree? And then under each of the 3 areas, you can go and click onto the exemplars and look at a sample set of exemplars and get a sense of whether or not those exemplars support the descriptor. Okay, so this is live, the survey, and we have had our first tranche of feedback. Now, most of the feedback so far has come from schooling. About 2/3 have come from secondary schooling, principals and heads of department, literacy folk, etc. About 1/4 has come from tertiary so far. And we are hoping that you might go away and have a look at this and provide us with some feedback too. But so far, we've got some pretty high levels of agreement that the way we're describing the benchmarks, they're about right. Okay, we're going to keep this live for a period of time. And Kathryn and David, I think we're going to do some joint work in here as well. Is that right? Yeah, I'll leave Kathryn and David to talk some more about that later on. Little bit more variation around whether the specific exemplars really support the benchmark and the descriptors, but that's to be as expected, right? When you start to get right down inside what does the embedded literacy demand look like. And of course we've got lots of time to review those and shape those exemplars up. We've got a lot more work to do in this space yet. We have no agreement, but this is our direction of travel. The key thing that came about in the feedback that fascinated us from people's comments was, and we get this in education all the time in schooling, that normative thinking, our kids wouldn't be able to do this. Now, we can't build an education system off what our kids are doing today if today isn't serving them to be successful in work and life and in schooling. So we have to keep a close eye on what is the demand that our curriculum requires and how do we support and scaffold our learners and our teachers to be able to meet that demand. So let's be very clear. Now, people use the word aspirational. In one sense, I guess it is, but it's also a bit of a bottom line for myself and my team, which is, but we have to help these young people be successful in work and life. Okay, so that normative thinking is alive and well in schooling, and of course we've got to do a lot of work to support the building of capability. And of course the other key theme was students would need a lot of support. That's right, they'll need a lot of support and they'll need a lot of good teaching that will enable them to be able to meet that benchmark. So, where are we going with this work? So the most important first step is we have to agree across the system. So this will have an impact on the work you do, because we'll be trying to line ourselves up. We've got to agree and anchor this benchmark. We're talking to ministers about it soon. We've got a lot more work to do. It's very emergent. Now, that we must set any change coherently so that we don't set a change here that's going to have an unintended consequence in the system over here. And that's why Kathryn and David and NZQA, we're working side by side on this piece of work, and our advice is joint. We will be launching our literacy progression framework. Now, that's actually going live next week. And what we will do is try to get a link onto your website, Nikki, so that we can get you straight there, if you're interested, to go and have a look and see how it lines up with the adult learning progressions, okay? So we undertake to make that link with you so that if you're working with young people who are still in schooling, for example, you might be able to tap into that framework. So certainly happy to make that connection. We have got to learn to drive off progress information. It's one of our biggest concerns in schooling at the moment. We're taking achievement snapshots, and we've learned to be able to describe achievement at certain signposts over the curriculum, but we don't know enough about describing progress and growth. And we're very determined to learn more to support teachers, parents, students, to understand how they can describe growth and what's enough, okay? Particularly when we want all of our learners to leave schooling with NCA level 2. How might we track a pathway to ensure that all of our students get there? So we need some more sophistication. NZCER are amazing partners with us in thinking about our tools and how to use tools to help us understand growth. We've got to somehow assess we've got to somehow work out how to assess that benchmark. No decisions have been taken, but there's a lot we can learn from the work that has been done with our partners. We don't ever go back and start this work from scratch anymore. We start from what we're learning together. And then the two most important points: we have to use robust information to better target. We've got to get our resource, because it's precious. And a lot of you have raised the resourcing issue. There is not enough resource to go around, so we've got to make sure that we get the resource to where it is needed most. And the very last point really just cycles me back to Kathryn and David's work, which is how do we make sure all of our young people achieve this level of literacy and numeracy? And how do we make sure that we get our resource to the right place at the right time in order to make the biggest effect? Thanks for the chance to kind of help put that picture together again, and go well in your work. We think that what you do is incredibly important.
Any questions? Maybe one or two questions at the most to Denise.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Michael Norris from NZQA, and thank you folks for mentioning us and how we are contributing to this. Some of you will have heard my colleagues Amy and Annie yesterday talking about the new qualifications and how we are, under Amy's guidance, developing digital assessment for the new unit standards, for the literacy and numeracy unit standards. I'd just like to add one further bit of information, and it may be of interest, that the 6 literacy and numeracy unit standards are up for review this year. The review will be publishing notice of the review shortly on our website, so keep an eye on it. But if you want to get an early, make a link with me today and we can include you from the very first messages. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Aroha mai. Your year 1 to 10, how does it align to whare kura and Rumaki? And who set the benchmarks for wharekura and Rumaki?
That's a really good question. The thing that I did forget to say in the presentation was the evidence that has driven this investigation has largely emerged from English medium schooling. So what we're still completing is, do we have the same set of problems in Māori medium? And we don't think the problems are the same. So we're building our story of what do we know from the evidence? Is there a problem? And if there is, then we will dovetail the work. If there isn't a problem, then it's absolutely no point in going down the same pathway. So the challenge for us is to understand what is the evidence telling us about learners wherever they are in the system. Thank you for reminding me, because that was a point that I did miss in my slides.
Just building on to that, you talk about the future and where they are today and looking to the future. So we're all in the same planet and the same world. We're all heading to the same future. So you'd be really interested to keep an eye on that.
Absolutely.
Kia ora.
Great point. Kia ora.
One more, thank you.
Good morning. I'd just like to ask about whether there are any plans for routine screening for dyslexia in schools. Certainly, we talk about supporting our young people to achieve in literacy and numeracy, but if they actually do have some difficulties with learning, such as dyslexia, there's not really any routine screening here that I've noticed that will actually identify those that have got those issues and can be helped early.
Yeah, I expected that comment to come up today. You will know that the select committees in the final stages of their recommendations around dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, and so we're working with select committee around what those actions and recommendations might look like. Dyslexia is a very hard thing to pin down, and you know that internationally there's no agreed definition. However, we know what specific learning needs and behaviours look like. There are a range of supports, but there are not systematic supports, so I think your comment's a fair one. One of the recommendations, or certainly some of the dialogue from Select Committee, was around screening and early identification, so watch this space.
Okay, nice and fast, please. Last one.
Sure.
So we'll go to morning tea very shortly. It's all out there waiting for us. And we'll recommence at 11 o'clock. Thank you all for your attention.
Okay, so, sorry. First of all, brilliant. I think this has been needed for a while from MOE. I just wonder what TEC are going to do about the students that have fallen through the cracks and we can enrol on programmes because they've already got NCEA level 1 or NCEA level 2, and in effect we have grounded those students in progressing in higher education because we're unable to enrol a student on a level 1 programme who already has NCEA level 2 or 1. You see?
Okay, thank you for that. So prior achievement, this is a very hot topic at TEC at the moment, and linking it back to the data, so for the first time we're actually making this visible. So a colleague of mine, Kathryn, who is unfortunately sick today, so it's work's underway. We've been presenting to our senior management. It's a bit like watch this space. We've been working, actually, Marie, have you got anything to add? Yeah. We've been collecting feedback from providers. The PTE, our PTE team have been talking to a lot of you. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes, so to watch this space. Is that enough for now?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I just wonder if we can use our professional judgment and, you know, which is quite professional.
Yeah.
And
so that actually came through in the feedback as well from TEO. So yeah. So there's work planned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm either a very good facilitator or a very bad one. What was supposed to be a 1 hour session turned into a 1.5 hour session. But I'm sure you'll agree it was well worth it to hear from these wonderful people. So you'll thank us once again. So thank you, Kathryn and David from TEC, Denise Arnerich from MOE, and Ben Gardner from NZCER. Morning tea is served. David, here's all your notes here.